Shri Krishna the Supreme Vedantist, Delhi, Saturday 20th October 1956, Series 11, edited and founded under direct order of His Divine Grace Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada by Goswami Abcharan Bhaktivedanta Sannyasins who follow the philosophical path of Agriya Sripad Samkara are now generally known as the Vedantist. And those who follow the philosophical paths of Vaishnava Agriyas such as Agriya Sripad Ramanujacharya, Sripad Madhvacharya, Sripad Visnaswami etc. are known as the Bhagwats. The so-called Vedantists designate the followers of Vaishnava Agriyas as Bhagwats, whereas for themselves they think that Vedanta philosophy is the monopoly subject matter for the studies of the Samkrites only. Following this principle, some other classes of sannyasins who are not recognized either by the Sankrites or by the Vaisnavites also designate themselves as Vedantists. These latter class of Vedantists are now known all over the world as the preachers of Vedantist philosophy, while they do know nothing of the transcendental science. Vedanta philosophy is not a combination of several Sanskrit alphabets so that anyone and everyone can understand it simply by the ABCD knowledge of Sanskrit language. Each and every letter of the Vedanta philosophy is a symbolic representation of transcendental sound represented by the symbol of Omkar, and as such Vedanta philosophy has to be learnt from one authority like Shri Krishna, the Godhead. In the Bhagavad Gita, the personality of Godhead has emphatically asserted that he is the original compiler of Vedanta philosophy and therefore he is the only supreme master of it. The exact wordings from the utterances of Shri Krishna are as follows. Sarbasya, Cha, Aham, Hirdi, Sanabhista, Mata, Smriti, Jnana, Apahanam, Cha, Vidi, Cha, Sarbai, Aham Iba, Vedya, Vedanta, Krit, Vedanta Vid, Iba, Cha, Aham. Gita 15:15. I am the person who lives as the super soul, Paramatma, in the heart of all living beings. It is from me only that one makes recollection of his past deeds, and it is also from me only that one forgets the same. So I am not only the all-pervasive impersonal Brahman, but also I am living individually as the Paramatma within every living entity. I am the awarding authority of everyone's fruitive actions. I do not exist simply as impersonal Brahman or the localized Paramatma, but also I do appear as incarnations to instruct all the fallen souls for their deliverance. I am therefore the instructor of the Vedanta philosophy, and the Vedic knowledge is meant for knowing me only. As I am the Vedanta compiler and instructor, nobody knows Vedanta philosophy better than me. I am the supreme Vedantist, and I can deliver the fallen souls by disseminating the transcendental knowledge of impersonal Brahman, the localized Paramatma, and myself as the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead. The personality of Godhead is the Supreme Brahman. This has been recognized by Arjuna by himself and in pursuance of the authorities like the seven rishis, Narada, Vyasa, Devala, Ashita, etc. Now how does the supreme authority of Vedanta philosophy teach us the great transcendental philosophy in a nutshell? He says like this: Dvu, Purusha, Lok, Kshara, Akshara, Ekpa, Cha, Kabara, Sarbani, Bhutani, Kutasta, Akshara, Uchyate. G. 15:16. The supreme Vedanta utters in the beginning of his Vedanta teachings as Dvu or dualism. In the universe, Lok, which consists of lakhs and crores of different earths and planets, there are two classes of living entities. The one is called Kshara or the fallible living entity, and the other is called Akshara or the infallible living entity. The fallible entities are the ordinary living entities or the Jivas, whereas the infallible entities are the expansions of Vishnu such as Rama, Nrsimha, Varaha, Kurma, Vaimana, Valadeva, Kalki, etc. The ordinary living beings are susceptible to the influence of Mother Nature, but the infallible incarnations as Vishnu Tattvas are non-susceptible by the laws of nature. In the Varaha Puranam it is said that the Supreme Lord expands himself by multi-forms of living entities. Some of them are called the Samsa or he himself, whereas the others are called the Bhivanansa or he in one of the potencies. The Jivas or the living entities are therefore different potencies of the Supreme Lord, whereas the Vishnu incarnations as above mentioned are non-different from him with all his potencies. That is the difference between the Kshara or the fallibles and the Aksharas or the infallibles. The Kshara living entities are undoubtedly parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, and as such they are qualitatively non-different from the Supreme Lord, but so far the quantity is concerned there is a gulf of difference. The Vedantist, therefore, who proclaims that the ordinary living entities are both qualitatively and quantitatively equal with the Supreme Lord, is certainly misguided for his not having consulted the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna, the original compiler of Vedanta. If Vedanta is an authority, one must accept its original compiler as the supreme authority of Vedanta. These novel Vedantists, who generally follow the path of Sripada Samkaracharya, were called formerly as Mayavadins of Kashi, Banras. Banras was, and perhaps still it is so, the breeding and nourishing place of these Mayavadi Vedantists. The reason is that Banras is the holy place resided by Vishwanath Shiva. Akriya Sankara was the incarnation of Shiva by the order of the Lord. He preached Mayavada philosophy in this age of Kali in the form of a Brahman sannyasi, and this statement is confirmed in the Padma Purana as follows. Mayavada, Ashat, Shastram Prakchanabhyam, Uchyate, Moya, Eba Godidam Devi, Kalu, Brahmana, Murtina. Therefore the followers of Samkara were known as the Mayavadins of the Banras school. They were counterparts of the Mayavadins of Saranath. This Saranath is adjacent to Banras, and in the older days the Mayavadins of Bodh or that of Saranath were always in arguments with the Mayavadins of Kashi. The Mayavadins of Saranath or the Buddhists did not recognize the existence of spirit soul, and they preached matter as all in all. Whereas the Mayavadins of Kashi preached that spirit soul is the basic principle of existence and matter is a superfluous false representation of the reality spirit. So the fight was there between the two sections of Mayavadins, and as a result of this, the Mayavadins of Bodh or Saranatha were gradually driven out of India, and the Mayavadins of Kashi became predominant in India. Gradually these Mayavadins took up Vedanta philosophy after they had come out victorious in the fight with the Buddhist Mayavadins, and as such the Mayavadins of Kashi began to be known as Vedantists. These Vedantists interpreted Vedanta in the impersonal feature in order to take in the then converted Buddhist philosophers in their own fold. Lord Buddha preached nothing of the spirit, and he stressed on the principles of ahimsa only, the preliminary and basic qualification for spiritual culture. We have already discussed this point in our article Lord Buddha in the Back to Godhead. Sripad Sankaracharya gave furthermore push to spiritual realization by the conception of Brahman, the first vision of the Supreme Lord. 1. Brahman, 2. Paramatma, and 3. Bhagwan. All these three are one and the same absolute truth, but they appear to be different by the different stages of realization only. How these different stages are realized is explained by the Supreme Vedantist Shri Krishna, who alone only knows Vedanta in its reality. Thus he explains the first realization of Brahman in the Kshara and the Akshara aspects. The Kshara, or the fallen souls as we are, have to learn Vedanta for knowing the Akshara or the infallible Brahman. Akshara means Brahman, Akshara Paramam Brahman. The Kshara are also undoubtedly Brahman in quality, but they are not Paramam Brahman because they are fallible to the influence of Maya, essence. The Mayavada's statement of all the two categories of Brahmans being equal in all respects is mistaken. It is a sort of class argument, but it is not de facto truth. In order to clear the matter more distinctly, the Supreme Vedantist Shri Krishna says that Sarbani Bhutani, i.e., all the living common entities beginning from Brahma, the original grandfather of the living being, down to the insignificant ant, are all fallible creatures, whereas the Supreme Brahman is Kutastha, or one who never changes his place or position. In the Amar Kosha the word Kutastha is explained as follows. That which remains in perfect order for all the time is called Kutastha. So the Kutastha Purusha or the Akshara Purusha or the Visnu Tattva is different from the Kshara Purusha or the ordinary living being subjected to the conditions of material nature. This distinction between the ordinary living being and the Supreme Lord is explained in the Bhagavad 11.16.11 as follows. Aparimita, Dhruva, Tanabrita, Jadi Sarbagata, Tari, Na, Sashyata, It, Niyama, Na Dhruva, Idaratha, Ajana Icha, Jat Mayam, Tat, Vimuchya, Niyantri Babitsamam, Anuyanatam, Jat Madam, Mata, Dustataya, on my Lord the Infallible. Had it been so that the innumerable living beings are by themselves all in all without anything supreme, then they would not have been put under your subjection. Even though it is accepted that the living entities are parts and parcels of the eternal being, still they are under your subjection. Their qualitatively being one with you is never to be given up, because that will alone make them one with the Absolute. It is being so, persons who consider that the ordinary living being and the Supreme Lord are equal in all respects are suffering from a malady of a wrong thesis polluted with poor fund of knowledge. So the quantitative difference between the living being is ever to be maintained even after the attainment of mukti, because after mukti only the nityayukta or the eternal upashava service begins. So far the impersonalists are concerned, they can know this much distinction between the kshara and the akshara prushas. And above the impersonalists and empiric philosophers, there is the yogi who meditates upon the Paramatma feature. For them it is said like this: Utama, Purusha, 2, Anaya, Paramatma, it, Udarita, Ya, Loka, Trum, Avishya, Bibharti, Iswara, Abha. Gita 15:17. Paramatma is clearly mentioned here as Anaya or different from Atma, and his realization by the yogins is still more perfect vision of the supreme truth than that of the impersonal Brahman. The yogins are better class of spiritualists than the impersonalists or the Mayavadis of Kashi. The Mayavadis of Kashi are higher than the Mayavadins of Bodhga or Saranatha, and the yogins of Prag like Bharadwa Muni etc. are still more higher spiritualists than the Mayavadins of Kashi. The Bhagavad Gita accepts this fact in the following sloka, namely, Tapasvikya, Adhaika Yogi Jnanibhya, API, Mata, Adhaika, Karnabhya, Cha, Adhaika, Yogi, Tasmat Yogi, Bhava, Arjuna. G. 646. The yogis are better class of spiritualists than the ascetics and the empiric philosophers. The yogis are undoubtedly better than the ordinary fruitive worker, and therefore, O Arjuna, you just try to become a yogi. So the ordinary yogins in the state of trance do experience the presence of localized aspect of Paramatma. This Paramatma is Iswara or the Supreme Lord, but not the Jivas or the controlled being. Paramatma is the super soul. The thesis that Paramatma and Atma is equal and the same is a wrong theory. Had it been so, then there was no need of adding the word Param or the superior to the word Atma. That makes the difference more clear. Paramatma is Abhyai, Akshara or Kutastha without any change. He does not become subjected to the conditions of material nature. This is the truth in all Upanishads. The Paramatma and the Atma have been compared with two birds sitting on the tree of this material body. But one is observing the activities of the other as witness and not taking part in the action. The neutral observer is therefore Paramatma and the stage actor is the Atma. When the Atma stops his material activities in the state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, he is called a perfect yogi. So this yogi is better spiritualist than Jnanin, who will after many births of speculation, become a Mahatma to observe the lotus feet of Vasudeva. And next to this are the devotees who render directly transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord. This realization of the absolute truth is the highest realization of spiritual value, and this is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita as follows. Amongst all the yogins the topmost yogi is he who has always within him the feature of Shri Krishna, me, and thus he has the required devotion and performs devotional activities. Bhajate. He is the highest yogi in my opinion. So these Bhakta yogins are better than the ordinary yogins, and their feature of spiritual realization is still more greater. The Bhakta yogins do accept Shri Krishna as the Purushottama or more perfectly clear than Paramatma realization. The absolute truth is realized by the Jnanins as impersonal Brahma, by the yogins as the localized Paramatma, and by the devotees as Bhagwan, who is full with all the potencies of Brahma and Paramatma as confirmed in all the scriptures including Bhagavad Gita. So realization of Shri Krishna transcendentally is the highest realization of Vedanta. Shri Krishna is the highest realization of the Vishnu Tattva. Because all other incarnations are although equal in potency, either plenary parts or parts of the plenary parts of Shri Krishna, but Shri Krishna is the primeval Lord and cause of all causes. That is the verdict of Brahma Samhita, Bhagavad and Mahabharata etc. But we should always remember that there is no difference between the different Samsa incarnations of Godhead. Realization of Brahman and Paramatma is also a transcendental mellow rasa, which is called Santa Rasa, a transcendental stage where the transcendental activities are non-manifest. Manifestation of transcendental activities is visible from the transcendental Dasya Rasa, and this rasa increases more and more in the Sakya Rasa, Vatsalya Rasa and Madhurya Rasa. The Supreme Lord Shri Krishna is full with all the 12 mellows. Out of these 12 rasas, 5 are direct transactions with the Supreme Lord, whereas the remaining 7 are indirectly connected. Kansa, Jarasandha and many other enemies of the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna dealt with him indirectly in the Bibhatsa Rasa, or the method of fearfulness. But because the rasa mellow was employed indirectly in the Supreme Being, the enemies were also awarded Brahman Sajaya Mukti, i.e., to become one with the Lord in existence. The impersonal monists aspire after this Brahmasya Mukti, which was obtained even by the inimical Jivas. Therefore mukti or liberation is a byproduct of devotional service. The yoga system is also a mixed-up devotional service. As long as the jnanins indulge in dry speculations only, they have no chance of mukti. When they mix up devotional service also with metaphysical speculations, it is then only mukti or liberation becomes possible. But for pure devotional service neither jnana nor yoga is necessary at all. Such processes may be helpful to a certain extent, but they are not absolutely a necessary requirement. On the contrary, such processes sometimes become a great hindrance to the process of pure devotional service. Sannyas is the process of the jnanis or yogins, but for the devotee there is no necessity of accepting the order of sannyas. Devotional service can be offered from any stage of life, and by devotional service only one can obtain the result, if he at all desires, like that of jnana, yoga, karma, tapasya or any other thing in the category of yana. Sarbam mad bhakti, yogina med, bhakta lavate, and jasa. Ordinary yoga system culminates in trance for experiencing the presence of Paramatma within us. But still more better system of yoga is the system of Purushottam yoga. The Supreme Vedantist describes this system of Purushottam yoga as follows. Jasmat, Charam, Adita, Aksharat, API, Iba, Uttam, Ata, Asmi, Lok, Veda, Cha, Pratitha, Purushottam. Because I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I am not only higher than the ordinary, Kshara, living being, but I am above the Akshara Brahman as also above the Uttam Purusha Paramatma. As such everywhere, either in the Vedic literature or by popular conception, I am famous as the Purushottam or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Vedanta conclusion is therefore like this. Primarily there are two classes of living entities, namely the Kshara and Akshara. The Ksharas are the ordinary Jivas and the Akshara is the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is realized by the Kshara Jivas in three different phases. The phases are 1. Impersonal Brahman, 2. Localized Paramatma, and 3. The Supreme Lord Bhagwan. This realization may be described by the example of seeing a mountain. The Himalayan mountain, when it is observed from a long distance, it appears like a big cloudy object. When one goes still more nearer, it appears like a big hilly land, but when one actually enters into the region, he sees Himalaya in all its natural beauty with all the living entities residing there. Similarly, if Vedanta is studied by one's ABCD, academic qualification of speculative habit, one can know the absolute truth as impersonal Brahman or something just opposite to our sensuous knowledge. When Vedanta is studied from the angle of vision of a yogi, who has completely stopped in sense indulgence, the absolute truth becomes visible in his own self by the Paramatma feature. But above all these, when Vedanta is studied from the angle of Shri Vyasadeva, who is a power incarnation of Godhead, the original compiler of Vedanta Sutras and its annotation Srimad Bhagavatam, there the absolute truth is revealed in his substantial feature or Param Satya. The Vedanta Sutra begins with the Sutra of Janmadhyasya Jatha, and with this sutra also the genuine commentation Srimad Bhagavatam also begins. Srimad Bhagavatam excludes carefully the four primary principles of the common Vedas, namely practice of religiosity, planning of economic conditions, fulfillment of sense desire, and at the end to get salvation by mental speculation. The Vedanta Sutra and Srimad Bhagavatam are one and the same thing, and the purpose is explained in the Bhagavad Gita in the chapter of the Purushottam Yoga. So a perfect Vedantist is a devotee of Shri Krishna. Impersonal Brahman is the glowing effulgence of the Supreme Person as the light is to the fire. Bhagwan Shri Krishna the Purushottam is fire himself. Brahman and Paramatma are therefore emanations of Shri Krishna, and that is the verdict of the great philosophy of Vedanta Sutra, so much adored all over the world along with Bhagavad Gita.